and about sovereignty in particular. But Hegel has a one interesting, beautiful moment in this this theory of his. At the end of his work, he writes that there exists also the people's sovereignty. When I read that I simply was my jaw dropped, and he doesn't explain really, but he points to the fact that if you don't understand that people's sovereignty exists, you should understand that. And if you Hegel reviews the sovereignty of monarch apart from this sovereignty. If you do that, then you don't understand anything in politics and the issue itself. And I was really surprised at that point. Well, from that point, I started digging more deeply on this issue. And I understood that our lessons, why are they good? Because here we read lectures, materials from a working place of a researcher, from his table. We write articles, books, and immediately include these materials into the agenda, into the schedule, and we read this live research material. About 10 years ago in the Rod University, when I read these lectures on this topic, on the state, at first, in the first time, and I remembered an Arab thinker, Ibn Khaldun. He wrote in 14th century about the political problems of the East, and he writes that the state emerges very simply. Some powerful and rich and clever person organizes a team. They go to some city, kill all the local authorities there, local aristocrats there, and install their own power. The local elites, kill all the local elites, and that's where his kingdom begins. Ibn Mahmud or whatever. So this Ibn Mahmud reigns, and his loyal 100 or 200 fighters who came with him are his surroundings, his elite, but then they get old, their sons come to power, the sons are lazy and do nothing, and they didn't have to fight for anything, they are talentless, and another, band of comes and kills them and install the new power, new sovereignty. Now, in Constitution of 1977, these bastards who destroyed the state, they have included in the Constitution of the USSR that each republic is a sovereign state. And that was the preparation at that time, in 1977, they prepared to destroy USSR. And so I started thinking, how does this happen? Who did that? Who prepared this constitution? And I started digging, and finally I found out, to my surprise, that this new constitution was thought about first by Khrushchev. That's who had the idea to create such a constitution. And in 1962, it was a working commission was created under the leadership of Alexander Yakovlev, the traitor, one of the traitors of the Soviet Union. That was the time when he first started working, in Khrushchev times. And of course, in 1985 and during the perestroika, his role, I will tell you a bit later about his role in that. Yes, so that's where my jaw dropped, really. And I thought, Jesus, that was him. He led the commission. At that time, he had 40 years old. He was basically a young man. And he was among the old elephants. But for some reason, they gave him this responsibility to prepare a new constitution of that kind of treacherous constitution of USSR. And I thought, why? Because the head of ideology was Suslov. He was his cover. Secondly, Suslov, his closest assistant was Ponomarev. Some older comrades probably remember this guy, Boris Ponomarev. His nephew they showed on TV just recently because of what happened in Dagestan. Turned out he actually managed those guys, led those guys who created this problem in the airport. And he's a seasoned Russophobe. And he lives in Ukraine mainly, or in America, or in Lithuania. And from there he manages these foreign agents against modern Russia. So this young Ponomarev is well, he's a distant nephew of that older Ponomarev, the older traitor. So this Boris Nikolaevich Ponomarev, the old one, is seasoned veteran, one of the main anti-Stalinists. Yes, so anti-communists. And he's editor-in-chief of all the newspapers, magazines, and such, and books of the post-war, of all the post-war history books of the CPSU about the party history. Many there's this. The history of the CPSU in many volumes. They were all prepared under his lead, this Ponomarev guy. So I found the first edition of this textbook, 1958, I think it is. Issued in 1958, and looked at his work. G. To the 5th Congress of the Soviets of the Soviet Russia, where the first constitution was approved, was being approved. It is devoted 20 lines to that. in the book this big, just 20 lines about this. About this very important, prominent thing. Moreover, the All Russia Congress of the Soviets of the Workers, Peasants and Soldiers Deputies, Congress of the Soviets, he wrote the words Congress of the Soviets from small letters, no capital letters, small letters. So no respect, no, as if they are not bodies of power, as if they weren't bodies of power. And by that time, I understood already that the supreme power, I found it out. It's not just, it wasn't just my opinion. I found this out from the Constitution of the 1938. Sorry, 1918, from the Constitution, the first Constitution of the USSR. And there, it was clearly stated in this first Constitution that the supreme power belongs to the Congress of the Soviets. And because it's the supreme power, we write it from capital letter, with capital letters. The Congress of the Soviets, right? Capital letters, because it's the supreme power. It should be named that. It's a name. And suddenly, in a textbook of the history of the CPSU, I see this kind of mistake. These kind of people made it. Academics. Academic Ponomarev. Is that really a mistake? At first I thought, yeah, it's probably a misprint or something. And I started searching. How about the others? What did the others do with this? And I see that the others did the same thing. Like in Lukyanov's collection of all the different laws about the Soviets throughout all these 70 years, he was the editor of this book. So the congresses of the Soviets are also written without capital letters, as if they're not the supreme power. But before the war, before the Second World War, what was the picture? In the books, there was I have a textbook, The History of the VKPB, 1930 edition, written by Alexander Bubnov. And Bubnov, he was a member of the first Soviet of the workers in Ivanovo, the very first Soviet, the Workers' Deputies Congress. And he was the chief propagandist of the Red Army at those times when the textbook was written. So very serious, a very responsible guy, scientist. He wrote this thick volume of the history of the VKPB, of the party. One of the first volumes about the history of the party. And there he has the name of the Congress is written with capital letters. Capital letter. You know, everywhere in the book, as it should be. So, the Congress of the Trade Unions starts with small letters, its name. But this Congress of the Soviets, capital letters, because it's supreme power. It's like emperor, right? So if you speak about the emperor, write something about the emperor, you because he's the supreme power, you start his post name of his post with capital letter. Because they're gonna chop your head if you don't, if you will. Okay, so speaking short, I saw that as the development of the whole thing, as the whole thing unravels, develops, this mistake sort of creeps in. And then I understood that this only seems a mistake, but it's not. It was someone's goal to diminuate, to decrease the role of this Congress of the Soviets as supreme power. And in 1936, the Congress of the Soviets as supreme power, it wasn't cancelled, but it somehow disappeared by itself. So because the elections are now territorial, in 1936 became territorial, and because you don't have to elect the Congresses of the Soviets and of these local ones, and going up the hierarchy up to the Congress of the Central Congress of the Soviets. So, in a way, the Congress of the Soviets stopped functioning as a supreme organ, or as a supreme body of power. And what has become the supreme body of power? The Supreme Soviet of the USSR has become that. But this Supreme Soviet of the USSR now was elected directly from below. For this reason, the connection was lost. Connection of this supreme power with the people. The whole state, the power in general, has lost its connection to the working class, to the factories. What does it mean? It means that the character of the power changed. The character of the supreme power had changed. That's what happened. So previously we had the Soviet of the workers and peasant soldiers deputies, really Soviets, and with their real actual power. And now it's basically a bourgeois. Now it has become a bourgeois parliament. Actually, in practice. Another issue is that the party, Communist Party, and the employers, the workers and the factories and the party organizations, they did organize all that and somehow kept the character of the sovereignty and the character of the power by the Soviet communist groups. Kept the character Soviet and communist. The character itself was kept by them, Soviet and communist. But it is easy to understand that this only lasted till Stalin was alive. And now I understand that at that time, up until the war finished, almost, about that time, the Stalin did not have any relation with sovereignty, with the issue of sovereignty. He didn't review it. Why? Because it simply was not in within the grasp of his within the circle of his notions, of everyone's notions. They never encountered this problem, this issue. But after the war, they did encounter this problem, because the politics of the USA they could see that the European countries were losing their sovereignty because of USA's actions. Now, the Bretton Woods financial system, because it transfers all finances, makes all financing dependent on the dollar, it also loses its sovereignty. And Stalin and the leaders, other leaders, they felt that those countries are losing their sovereignty. And I was surprised that in the last speech on the 15th Congress, in his final speech, Stalin's speech, he spoke about the fact that modern countries have lost the banner of sovereignties and independence, their independence. And you will have to raise up this banner of sovereignty that they've lost. But to raise this banner of sovereignty, you must understand what kind of banner it is, to see it somehow, have it in your consciousness, in your mind. But as far as I understand today, the consciousness, these young socialist rulers, they have a weak consciousness, weak understanding. Even on the issue of dictatorship of the proletariat, they were pretty cold towards this notion. They didn't understand. In 1947, when there was a meeting of the party, almost no one remembered about the dictatorship of the proletariat. And only Hungary did remember, but criticizing something. In 1953 in Germany, there was an uprising, and in Hungary there was a big uprising and big murders in 1956 in Hungary. And in Czechoslovakia in 1968. So they didn't really consciously understood this issue. So Stalin came and saw it and tried to show that you should grasp it. This is a lot. And you should research what's the essence of this is. What's the problem is, really. But probably they didn't get to it. Comrades Khrushchev and Ponomarev and Andropov and Yakovlev, all those traitors, as far as I understand, at that time he was a hired person, hired by enemies, by some Western powers probably. And his memoirs, I'm rereading them right now. So I didn't read the memoirs at first carefully enough. So I just thought, okay, he's a traitor and that's it. That was clear, we know that. And in 1987 I already heard of this. Not interesting, right? Uninteresting. But now when all this period has finished, when he died, and why I encountered the problem of this problem of sovereignty, I have in the library I have ordered this book, two of his books, and today I finished reading them and gave them back to the library. And of course, you can see that this person creates hostile texts, hostile to Soviet power, and not even that probably wasn't even his own will, but someone moved his hand, especially in the first book. The first book is called The Depth of the Memory. Deep depths of the memory. And the name of itself, more like swimming hole, water hole, or a vortex of memory. And this name itself shows that this is something subjectivist. This only concerns myself, my memory. On the other hand, we know, as the Russian proverb goes, in a dark water hole there are imps. Imps inhabit the dark water hole, and so the same word, water hole or vortex. And so there's lots of imps, lots of demons there, demons in a whirlpool, including, now I can see, American demons. You speaking about the books by Yakovlev? Yes. Alexander Nikolaevich Yakovlev. The second volume, the second book. The first was written in 2001, and the other was written in 2 years, in 2003. Different publisher. And someone definitely worked on the text of these books. At first I thought these are two different books. These were two different books. The other books I've read, the other I haven't read. And I thought, well, I gotta read the new one. But then I look, gee, this isn't a new book. An old book was, the old book of 2001 was taken, and inserts were made. Some things were inserted that are supposed to program the ideological struggle in the future. So he implants the idea that in March, April 1985 they have made a revolution. That's how he calls all that. March, April revolution, 1985. So some people, later generations, are going to read that in schools and teach in schools. And the Democrats will say, this was a revolution, guys. So what we say is, this is the finish of counter-revolution. And for them, they say it was a revolution. Come on. Yakovlev, Doctor of Historical Sciences. He wrote that. A very revered member of whatever. And here we have some Alexander Kazyonnof no one knows about. Some survived Stalinist. This thing so I have brought this as an example, for instance, this thing. And of course, in these books, in the first book and in the second too, he published two of his letters that he wrote to Gorbachev. But one was written in early December of 1985, but didn't send the letter. And the other, in 2 weeks, changed letter, and he added some stuff in it. And he sent it then to Gorbachev as a memorandum, not for printing, but for personally for Gorbachev. And in this letter, he offers, in this memo, he offers a political reform. In paragraph 1, it was said that they should divide the party in two parts. One was Communist Part, and the other was supposed to be People's Democracy Part. And do that in each of the republics of the USSR. And it should be led by the Congress of these communists, of these parties, and so two different congresses. So like a two-party system. And there will be a president who will have the president power, and he will be the chairman of the Congress of the parties, of the separate parties, of separate republics. So it was just a landmine, a bomb under a mine, under a very primitive consciousness that he thought was the Gorbachev was supposed to have. Gorbachev was supposed to have primitive consciousness, and we know what this Gorbachev's endeavor finished with. It finished with the presidency, except this was written in December 1985, and Gorbachev became president in 1990, right? So, gentlemen, and that's how, if we look at the more an earlier history of the issue. In 1983, his career of a diplomat in Canada was coming to an end, Yakovlev. And he probably had close, friendly ties both with intelligence services and with the Prime Minister Trudeau. And when they arranged, using their connections, the trip by Mikhail Sergeyevich Gorbachev to Canada. And in Canada, he introduced Gorbachev to Trudeau, Yakovlev. So they had a very nice talk, and Trudeau liked Gorbachev, and he talked about this with Margaret Thatcher, British leader. And at the end of 1984, she invited Yakovlev and Gorbachev to London. In December 1984, they flew to London to be looked upon. So Margaret Thatcher looked at him and said, "Oh, I can do business with this guy. We can do business with this guy." And told that to American President Reagan. And in 3-4 months, Chernenko suddenly dies, or Chernenko next, the leader of USSR before Gorbachev, promptly dies, as Kazyonnof puts this. And in March, Gorbachev comes to power. Think whatever you want. Everything develops very fast. And everything is under Yakovlev's control. And now I understood that Gorbachev has fulfilled the role of the Great Inquisitor. And I, on one of my lectures, told you who is the Grand Inquisitor is. Dostoevsky's character in Brothers Karamazov novel. So Yakovlev was this Great Inquisitor in reality. Such a great bastard. And he simply managed, ruled Gorbachev, his actions, to and Gorbachev in his student years in Moscow, he lived in with a student who was the head of all Czech students in Moscow at the time. And his father was the head of the Central Committee of the Communist Party in Czechoslovakia. And this student wasn't a communist, really. He was a social democrat at the time. And when he came to the Czech Republic, he really did a party, got up the ladder very fast, and wrote a book about socialism with a democratic face. And this scientific book was used in 1968 in Prague Spring, in what occurred in Czechoslovakia, in the uprising. And of course they took him in his as a member of their team, the Democrats. They have destroyed, with his help and with the help of people like him, and including Dubček, the first secretary, they have destroyed the socialist state there in Czechoslovakia, installed the new bourgeois power, and they didn't need that student, the Czech guy, anymore. They threw him out, and then he got back to Austria, and in Austria he worked as a teacher of politology. He taught politology there for some time. So Gorbachev confessed that they were very close friends up until the Czech guy's death in 1997. He said that their worldview, their views were very similar. Both were stood for socialism with a democratic face, whatever that means. This is a social democratic, not communist concept. So Gorbachev was prepared to his role and was led by Yakovlev, the traitor. And Yakovlev, this is my remark, Yakovlev was also the head of the KGB. So for a time. So Stalin warned communists of all countries, but it turned out it actually concerned us in the first place. And of course, this Joseph Stalin didn't suspect that because this group in 1953, it wasn't prominent, it wasn't on the surface, it wasn't ripe. This group of traitors. But I don't know if it's a coincidence or not. Exactly in March of 1953, Yakovlev was transferred from Yaroslavl obkom to the Central Committee of the CPSU. So from a local city head in power leaders to the Central Committee. Analyze this, think whatever you want about this, but these are the facts. So the notion of the sovereignty, we have already touched upon this issue. Let's get back to that. I will, in short, repeat that sovereignty is the state power itself. And in ancient Greece or in ancient Rome, they didn't have this notion of sovereignty. Power and supreme power was the same for them. They didn't have the division into these, they weren't divided into different things. Why is this supreme power special? Because it is power, namely, sovereignty is power in the sense of the word. Is power properly. Power is power. It reigns, right? And Lenin how was it formulated? Look at how differently was it formulated when there was the Congress and when the Constitution was being created. He declares on the Congress of the Soviets, "We take power in our hands," Lenin says. We are the power. Us, ourselves. So sovereignty is power that is based on or comes out of itself. It means to create all the other bodies of power and laws. So the Congress, as supreme power, appoints all the other powers. The All-Union Central Committee that is supported by the line of Soviets, and the Soviet of Commissars as the executive branch, as organs or as bodies of their power. They're the bodies, the organs, and the Congress of the Soviets is the power itself. It decides everything and defines everything, and if it's needed, it will change and makes the other organs, other bodies of power, report back to it. and can replace anyone at any time, especially in revolutionary times. So these years, right, please read Lenin's works he wrote in 1917. He foretells many things. How the new power is going to be formed. The party was ready, commissars were prepared. How the Congress work will be organized. And when the founding Congress took place, they don't know what to start with, who should be the spokesperson, like who should lead the Congress. One of the socialist revolutionaries offered. We've got a guy, the oldest of us. Let's him do it. And so the grandfather came out to the stand and said, "I hereby declare this Congress opened." And everyone started screaming and whistling at him, and he got scared and ran away. But he opened the Congress. That was his role. The Congress started working. And again, they don't know what to do. And Comrade Sverdlov gets up, comes out, reads the Declaration of the Rights of the Exploited People. The Soviet power is created. I congratulate you, dear comrades. And they don't know what to do next again. And that's how the founding meeting took place. Up until 4 in the morning, they had all these foolish talks and were arguing, and then they said they're tired because it's 4 o'clock in the morning, naturally. So everybody dispersed, and the next day they came, and there was a lock on the door. It was locked, and they simply dispersed because they didn't know what to do. They're not the power, really, not themselves. So the sovereignty is concentrated in the supreme power, within the supreme power. So, what relation does it have to the dictatorship of the proletariat? Simple. Firstly, we keep on speaking about the dictatorship and the revolution, the dictatorship of the working class, but it is fulfilled, materialized in union with the people. It's a power of workers, peasants, soldiers, Cossack, and whatever, some deputies. So this power, in its form, is created by the people. This power is the people's sovereignty. That's what people's sovereignty in real sense of the word is. It is created by the dictatorship of the proletariat. And if there was no dictatorship of the proletariat, no clear sovereignty of the people would be possible. First time in history, it appeared in clear state at that time. And the deputies weren't just representatives of the people, of the supreme power. They were representatives of the supreme power at the bottom of the hierarchy. So the whole society was lined with this supreme power. It's not like today, our bourgeois power, leaders, they gather in Kremlin and you cannot reach them. You have no way of reaching them. In Kremlin and in the Red Square, to these people there. They're like hidden like behind a stone wall from the people. There's a wall between them and the people. And they hide there and they, write and sign all those laws, appoint those laws. And do all those things to the population, and no war is needed. So no other way except installing the sovereignty of the people. Now we know what it is. Installing sovereignty of the people without the dictatorship of the proletariat is impossible. And until it is done, no serious changes in Russia. There will not be any serious changes until we install the dictatorship of the proletariat. And this multipolar world they're talking about is again just lies. Because there's a contradiction within the definition. Contradictum in adjectum, as the ancient logic scientists of logic said. Polarity. There can be two poles, like northern pole and southern pole. So female and male, two polar things, and they attract each other, right? And everywhere in nature, polarity presupposes two contrary poles or moments, and multipolarity is contradiction in definition. It doesn't exist. Ideologically, to open a certain perspective by a small state that never had a state and never will, it's done for these kinds of states, so that they could see that there are certain powers that you can use to be safe from the hegemon, from one pole, right? Who still acts, is very powerful in the world. The USA have oppressed and suppressed everyone, and we can see that. Now these people fight using whole countries against us, using a country against us, Ukraine, so that Ukraine would be fought with us. And they, at the time, they would renew their military potential and use up their old weapons to buy the new ones. Against China right now, they are trying to put Taiwan against the China, and think they think that there'll be also a war of Taiwan against China. Taiwan will weaken their Chinese brothers. So right now, Xi Jinping, Chinese leader, as far as I understand, he's getting ready to that, so that it would happen in some at a minimal scale, if it will. It's better to avoid that, of course. So the issue of the sovereignty is a very serious and big issue. And we weren't ready for it because of these reasons I told you about. Because of the sources of the problems in understanding what it is, what sovereignty is. So I told you those sources of weaknesses, named you, and maybe some young people will think on that more, elaborate that, and we will solve this issue more or less. So, dear comrades, all this is very important, and all of this cannot be done outside the struggle of the communist parties for the dictatorship of the proletariat. Only the dictatorship of the proletariat ensures sovereignty. Modern Russia will get out of the influence of the United States, get away from this pole, and Putin, we should give him credit that he works on the struggle against the fascism. That is the forefront of this American hegemonism. But alone, Putin cannot handle that. In union with China, yes, they can build such a two-polar world, at least for some time, that where China will ensure for Russia this kind of cover, and in the sense we won't have a full sovereignty in this situation. We will now be a dependent country, dependent on China at a great extent, at a significant extent, dependent on China. But nevertheless, protection by China from USA, it will help us have our own sovereignty. It's another very big and important issue. Unfortunately, our time runs out. I just will point out that Russia had already been in such situation when it was part of Ulus Juchi. In 13th century, Russia was ruled by Tatar Mongols, the so-called Mongols, Tatar Mongols, and we paid tribute to them, around 10% of all our income. But the Ulus Juchi itself, it wasn't a independent state. It was part of Genghis Khan Empire as one of the states, dependent states. So was a whole hierarchy, and so the history repeats itself. But this we have to research. Still up to research. Still hasn't been researched. Maybe our young will hear that and deal with it, and will clarify for us what it is and how should we do in this situation concerning this modern situation. Thank you. Questions? No questions. Okay, so that's the end of lecture by Kazyonnof. I won't translate the rest because it's, some other guys will speak, and I'm tired. Okay, that's all. That's it for today. Bye.